I'm Chris Wright, and I'm the Vice President, Chief Technologist at Red Hat. And I'm here to talk about OpenStack, what we're doing with OpenStack to bring it to our customers, what enterprises are doing in general, and how they're changing their view on infrastructure and IT. And there's going to be a little bit of buzzword compliance in here. I apologize in advance. I'm an engineer, and so I cringe a little bit. But it's also just sort of how some of this is survey information. It's how we talk with the sort of C-suite at our enterprise customers. And I think it's important to understand, not just from a developer community point of view, kind of what code are we hacking on, but what's the broader context. So I didn't make all this sessions this morning, so I don't know how many people here are active OpenStack developers. A few, okay. And then how many people here are actually running OpenStack in your organization, putting it into production, or at least testing it? And okay, so we have more operators, fewer developers. Crap, I got the wrong slide deck. And then some folks here, I imagine, are just here to learn about OpenStack. It's new to you, and all right, so a good blend, awesome. So the kind of enterprise journey in IT right now is about how businesses are trying to change themselves to adapt to a really new set of market pressures and take advantage of a new set of market opportunities. And so the things you hear in this context are digital transformation and agility and all that kind of stuff. And what that really is getting at is that the role of the IT group in an organization is changing. And this is some information coming from a survey of a bunch of our customers, the CIOs of our customers. And we're asking them, what are the top important things? What's top of mind for you? And top of mind for these CIOs is, first and foremost, changing the business, driving new business opportunities sourced from IT. And to me, this is a big shift. And for those of you who raise your hand as operators, I expect it's similar for you. A big shift from a time where IT was sort of like back in the corner, and it's about cost reduction and efficiencies, and it's not necessarily a front and center part of the company as much as it's a cost center. And this is about turning that part of your company into something that helps your company differentiate itself in the market. And you hear a lot about a company that's been Uberized or something like that, where really modern businesses are software companies in some way, shape, or form. And in that context, a lot of the IT groups have focused, it's a conservative group that's looking at keeping things up and running. And so security and risk mitigation are still top of mind. And that doesn't go away just because now you're helping drive the business. In fact, maybe it's even more important. And in order to do that from the CIO point of view, this means building a new infrastructure. And this is kind of the buzzword compliant way. Architecture supporting digital is a buzzword compliant way of saying, essentially a modern IT infrastructure that's more cloud-based. One of the things I think is really interesting about this kind of IT transformation journey is it spans industries. So it's not just the retail industry, it's not just the finance industry, it's not just the telecommunications industry, it's across all of these industries, and they're all facing similar kind of business pressures. And it's in that context that I think it's important that we as a community, especially in the OpenStack community, we think of this sort of holistically. It's not just we're making the most amazing cloud infrastructure for a certain use case, but we're building a platform that supports a wide variety of workloads, and that's what will make the community and the project and ultimately the consumers of this technology successful. So I think it's really important to think of this not just in the context of maybe your world, but looking at how we're bringing together a set of use cases that, as we collaborate, help expand the platform capabilities. And in my experience, part of that expansion includes refinement, architectural refinement. So as you add new features, you have to add, sort of additional layers of abstraction or whatever it is to incorporate these new features. And the end result is better software, which means more sustainable software, which means software that gets used more. So I think this is, for me, it's a really important mindset. And again, this is sort of all predicated on what are we doing? We're trying to help companies change their view around what is IT, what's the infrastructure. So as a technologist, you get excited about technology, and I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not just about technology. In fact, technology is a small piece of this puzzle. What's equally important is the people involved and the processes involved. And if you look at a traditional IT infrastructure where you've got this kind of like compliance requirements and these kind of rote heavyweight processes that are about writing things down on a piece of paper and handing it to somebody else and verifying that you've got the right bill of materials or that you've made it through some security checkpoint in your process, and maybe some siloed ownership of different parts of the infrastructure, that is actually the much harder part to change. It's easy to introduce a new piece of technology. It's harder to get companies to change how they work around that technology, and it's not necessarily effective technology if you're not changing how you use it. So we at Red Hat talk a lot about people, process, technology. It's these three different key pieces of this kind of digital transformation, or this process of going from IT as maybe a cost center to IT as an innovation center for your business. And what that means to me is that IT must evolve, and this is a holistic picture of IT evolution. And practically speaking, if you look in the industry across from different viewpoints, you see this evolution going, I like to think of it in kind of 4 separate axes. One being the development process. And historically we had a waterfall process, and it's served us well for many years, and you see more modern kind of agile and DevOps processes being a really critical part to helping move more rapidly within your organization. Different perspective, you have the application architecture itself, how you build the application has gone from maybe a monolithic application to client-server, end-tier application, to modern microservices style application development. From how do you take that application and bring it into production, we've shifted from kind of a very handcrafted artisan, you can appreciate that. Portland and Seattle share that kind of artisan handcrafted mindset, server running an application that nobody actually even knows anymore what's on that box because it's been touched so many times by so many different people, to automation tools around verifying exactly what you're putting into your image, to something that's really lightweight and focused 100% on just the application and the direct application dependencies like a container. And then in the application infrastructure side, we've gone from just a traditional physical data center to some kind of potential hosted environment to a cloud environment, which could be public or private. And what's interesting about these 4 different kind of evolutionary paths is they're somewhat independent of one another. So as an organization, you could take advantage of some combination of these things, and you would actually improve your ability to rapidly respond to the change that's coming at your business. And what's really powerful, and I think what's really interesting about this point in time in the IT industry's history, is that the confluence of these 4 things together is what is allowing some of these companies that are the new companies that are sort of creating great pressure against some of the incumbents in your various market spaces. Taking those 4 things together is what really brings the ability for you to rapidly introduce applications that matter to your customers. And I think of this in terms of the one thing that's constant in all of this is change. And so the technology tool that you pick today, it's awesome. You love it. You spend a lot of time vetting it. What's equally important is how you introduced it into your organization and how you're going to shift and change around it, because it's not going to be there forever. So part of those evolutionary, that evolutionary picture is getting at this notion that everything is always changing. And so the processes of how you bring code and bring change into your organization is as important, if not maybe more important, than the actual components that you're choosing. And obviously, we're here talking about OpenStack, and I think OpenStack is a critical component at the infrastructure layer. But a lot of this is also there to facilitate applications, because most people don't build infrastructure just for the sake of infrastructure. They build it to run applications. And I appreciated Randy's point of view about treating infrastructure similarly to how we're trying to treat applications in this modern environment. And I think of it in this sort of, call it a hamster wheel, call it whatever you want. It's like you're just always doing this iterative refinement on your process of developing something, whether it's an application or into your infrastructure, deploying it, analyzing it. And I think that's the most important part. When you're building up your infrastructure, you really need to understand what's going on inside. You need some level of telemetry. You need to be able to understand not just that I deployed it and it's off and running, but what's the current state? Where are things potentially breaking? How do I deliver an update into my infrastructure? So that analysis piece is especially in an application tier, that analysis piece is where you're actually verifying that you're doing what you set out to do. You're solving the needs and meeting the requirements of your customer, which as an internal IT, your customer would be your lines of business, your applications. So I'll shift gears a little bit and just say, here's my view on traditional application stack. You have a piece of hardware, you have an operating system, you have some applications that historically were written directly to that operating system using system calls and low-level system libraries, and those applications are actually difficult to write. So you've found over time the industry evolved around providing higher levels of abstraction and runtime environments that made it easier for a broader set of developers to build applications. And in those runtime environments, like Java, for example, you see real proliferation of applications in the enterprise. I think fundamentally that picture hasn't really changed. What has changed is sort of the definition of each of those layers. And so now your hardware is a data center worth of hardware. And that sort of resource management layer, that infrastructure layer, is a virtualization layer. And you have a combination of applications, some of which are written really directly to that virtual machine interface layer in your application orchestration or in your infrastructure management. Some of those are written to a higher level abstraction focused exclusively around application orchestration. And to me, this is actually really important, because here in the industry and in OpenStack, we have these conversations about what are we doing? It's a broad set of tools in OpenStack. We hear about containers, and everybody loves containers. Containers are awesome. Container orchestration tools like Kubernetes are competitive with OpenStack, complementary to OpenStack. I mean, it's a real question that we're trying to answer for ourselves. And my perspective is that they're complementary tools, and what really matters is focus. And if we think about how we're building infrastructure and supporting resource allocation out of your data center, there's some great tools to do that. If you're thinking about how you manage the service discovery and scale-out application, containerized scale-out applications, there's tools that are great at that, and there's no reason that they can't coexist. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And the way I phrase it is sort of perspectives matter. From a developer's perspective, you care about writing code and deploying your code. From an operations team point of view, you care about making sure the code is running, making sure things are within security compliance. It's a whole different set of considerations. And one of the challenges that we've seen in the cloud environment where you're deploying your application into a virtual machine has a combination of some low-level components like an operating system, some very application-specific logic, the app itself, and somewhere in the middle you've got your application runtime and dependencies. When you have two different teams trying to manage that same image because somebody cares about the security patching of the operating system and somebody else cares about the application patching of the app, there's a potential conflict there, and that can be confusing. It can blur the lines. You can step on each other's toes. So I think it's important to think what are where can things be separated? It's kind of one of the reasons that the containerization workloads have been really exciting to developers and operations teams together, because you have some level of separation of duty. So you have the ability to care about your application from an application point of view, care about compliance from a kind of base layer on up perspective of what are you delivering. And again, it's sort of separate tools for separate jobs. And I think that's a really important thing that we should be considering here in this community. And from Red Hat point of view, we work in a variety of these communities, so we think about it that way. So I wanted to also say OpenStack is an amazing project, and we've gone over the last, say, 5 years from cool community enthusiasm to production environments. And it's really accelerated in that production deployments of OpenStack in the last, say, 4 quarters. If we looked at, or sorry, 4 releases. If we looked at the OpenStack Foundation's numbers over the last 4 quarters, the number of production deployments has doubled. And our view on that is similar. So we're a part of that ecosystem. So we're seeing 42% of our customers putting OpenStack into production, which is a major uptick over the last couple of quarters. And also, so this is a survey that we've given to all of our OpenStack customers. Also, we're seeing a lot of interest in running a container kind of platform as a service orchestration system on top of that OpenStack infrastructure. And similarly, and these are kind of, the line gets blurred here a little bit, using containers on top of OpenStack. So a lot of interest in a PaaS system, a lot of interest in running containers, and a lot of movement from early POC, it's off in the corner in some lab, to it's a prominent part of infrastructure and it's in production. And so for those of you who are doing development on OpenStack, thank you for enabling that. And for those of you who have been brave in the early days and stuck with it and have brought it into production, thank you for working with us, because we couldn't do it without that kind of collaborative community investment in making this project successful. There's still work to do. So what are some of the key kind of challenges that we see? A lot of our customers are frustrated with the complexity of this of OpenStack, and what I like to remind people of is we are building a large-scale distributed system. Distributed systems are hard. You need to set your expectation there as a starting point. And so it's how can I deploy this system is the first question. And we've gone a long ways in the OpenStack community. We have invested into some projects in the upstream like Triplo and Ironic and Heat to kind of help bring our view of what an installation tool looks like. But honestly, that's not enough. Installation is day one or day zero. There's sort of the day one, day two operations, which I think are going to be the next critical challenges in this community for how do you operate this thing? How do you upgrade this thing? It is a complex system. It was hard to get it laid down and deployed initially. We also have to focus on ensuring that we can keep it running, we can keep it updated, and because this is the foundation for your company's digital transformation. Another request that we hear from our customers is, in that context of operations, is they're looking for automation tools, cloud management tools, just additional tooling, ops tools to help run the system. So that's, in our world, that's a lot of interest in things like Manage IQ and Ansible as just tools to help operations teams automate and manage the system. And there are a number of other tools out in the industry that are important in this context. The third thing here that I think is my favorite part, because I'm an open source developer, our customers are looking for leadership and the ability to influence a community based on their requirements. So they really get that open source is a development process that goes, that's not just developer focused, it's not just the developers that are doing all the work. User input really matters. And many users are a few steps away from that development process, and they don't know how to get involved. So they're really looking for partners in crime to get involved in the community on their behalf and understand what their requirements are and affect change in the community to help them realize their use cases. And I love that one because as a developer, I've spent a lot of time wondering if what I'm doing matters. You get deep into a piece of code and you can refine it forever, not knowing if it's meeting any customer's real needs. And so I really enjoy hearing directly from customers what they need and bringing that into the community and representing real world use cases. And to me, it gets back to that piece in the beginning where this is a global shift. Many different business verticals are involved in changing, and we're trying to represent all those different use cases into community like OpenStack here. And that's why it's important to invest in the community. It appears the LibreOffice community could stand some additional investment because my slide looks a little goofy, but Red Hat has a philosophy, we call it Upstream First. And so that's about doing all of your development directly in the upstream community before you ever put it into a product and deliver it into a customer's hands. And the reason for that is if you're operating in a different model, you run the risk of taking on a huge amount of technical debt that ultimately is a dead end. That cost is translated into cost for the customer. It's frustration across the board. It's tempting to do something quick and private, and it's fast and it's efficient in that moment. It has long-term costs that I think is really important to consider. And so, my plea to anybody who's working in this community is always consider kind of an upstream first mindset, and thinking in terms of investment into the community as an investment into sort of the health and long-term sustainability of the project. Again, you saw that slide with a statistic that said many of our customers are looking for the ability to have influence and impact into a community. Investing in your development time into that community is how you build some of that credibility and influence across any project in OpenStack. From our point of view, we're walking the talk. So we invest in OpenStack, we invest in OPNFV as a mechanism to bring telco requirements into OpenStack. We invest in Kubernetes. These are all areas where we put our time and developer focus so that we can ensure that we're being influential on behalf of our customers. Again, I think it's important to look at your own organization and where you can be involved in these different communities. And then specifically, within OpenStack, how can you get involved? Well, first and foremost, it's participate. Get involved, whether that's as a user with the operations group in OpenStack or whether that's as a developer working on a specific project. Really get involved and help the OpenStack community understand what your requirements are. Preferably coming with a problem statement, not a solution statement, because there's no better way to marginalize yourself in a community than come and say, here's how to do it, rather than here's the problem I'm trying to solve. But really, come and get involved. And then if you look at OpenStack being a large distributed community focused on a number of different projects, that creates a gap, and that gap is cross-project collaboration. So there are a number of different really important projects that in some cases are kind of hidden behind the scenes that are really valuable places to be involved ultimately for the health and long-term sustainability of the community. And that's places like in the Oslo project, which creates a set of essentially functional libraries that all the other services can use, QA and some of the tooling, or OpenStack Infra and some of the tooling around DevStack and Tempest and Zool and all. Like, one of the things I love about OpenStack is the continuous integration infrastructure that we've built in this community. I think it's amazing, and it's a great example of how being involved in one portion of the community can touch across all of the community and help everybody improve. Maintenance of the stable branch, again, it's across all the different projects. The security team, so you have a CVE, you get involved, you help vulnerability management, internationalization. These are examples of places where people can get involved, and it's not necessarily your first thought. And so really, my plea is get involved, join the discussion, be engaged and share your experiences and help us continue to build this thriving community so that we can build it long-term sustainable. So thank you.